This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Ruchim Abam. We continue in Mishnah Berurah Daf HaShavua. We're learning Siman Chafhei, Seif Yud. Imsach letzarech tefillin, eino ichayzer u'mevarech. We just learned Shitas HaMechabras, you make one bracha, l'haniach. Shitas HaRamaz, you make two brachas, l'haniach, and al mitzvahs. We learned in Sif Tes that if you speak out, then the Mechaber would agree that on the Tefillin Shel Rosh you make al mitzvahs tefillin, and on the tefillin, and the Rama would say on the Tefillin Shel Rosh you make two brachas if you speak out. Comes the Mechaber and he says, "Imsach letzarech tefillin eino chayzer mevarech." If you speak for the needs of the tefillin, you do not go back and make a bracha. Imshama kaddish. If you heard Kaddish or Kedusha, bein tefillah shel yad tefillah shel rosh, lo yavsik la'anois imam, you should not interrupt to answer with them, ela shoysek, but rather you should be silent, v'shomeya, and listen, u'mechavein l'ma she'omrim, and have kavana for what they say. So two halachos. Number one, if you talk out l'tzarech l'tefillin, you don't have to make another bracha. If you hear Kaddish or Kedusha, you should not be mafsik. If you do you have to make another bracha? The implication is no. But you shouldn't answer, but you should remain silent and listen and be mechavein to whatever they say. It says in Mishnah Berurah, imsach, va'afilu imsach, bein berchas lohaniach uvein hanachas ha-tefillin sheyad gam ken dinach. Not only if somebody speaks for the sake of tefillin, in between the shel yad and shel rosh, do you not have to make another bracha, but even if you interrupt between the recitation of the bracha and the placement of the tefillin, you also don't have to make a bracha. Einoi, even though it's not a hefsik b'di'eved, but l'charchila one should not interrupt between once you make the bracha l'haniach until after you put on the shel rosh, afilu b'dvarim shehin l'tzarech tefillin. Even for those things that are needed for the tefillin, im lo yehecha she'i efshar ben yinacher, unless it's impossible in any other way. Ach b'chol hamoyed she'ein mevarchin on Chalamayid, that we don't make a bracha. Efshar diyesh lahaka lechadchila bedvarim shehem letzarech tefillin. It could be on Chalamayid where those who put on tefillin don't make a bracha. It could be to talk out for the needs of the tefillin. That is not that you could even talk out lechadchila. So this is very interesting. There are two reasons not to be mafsik over here. Reason number one is to be mafsik between the bracha and the placement of the tefillin. You bring mafsik between the bracha and the mitzvah. You don't want to talk out because you want the lahaniach to go on the shel rosh as well. And third of all, it's supposed to be b'havaya achas. Ukshartam la'ois al yadecha v'hayu l'toitafois b'neinecha. It's supposed to be in one motion, so to speak. So it seems like the inyan of hefsek with the bracha is a much more chomer dika inyan than the inyan of havaya achas, because Mishnah Berurah is saying that lechatchila one should not talk out even dvarim that are needed for the tefillin, but on a day that you don't make a bracha, then it seems like you could talk out, even though again you're not supposed to be mafsik between the tefillin shel rosh and tefillin shel yad, even irrespective of the bracha. Sivkata lamed he lo yafsik va'afilu lanos amen al bracha zu gufa. Even to answer amen for this very bracha, could go in lanos amen al brachas tefillin shemavarchacher, to answer amen for the bracha of tefillin that someone else makes. Asar em lo yishachaveri mechavin lo hitzia bebracha zu, unless your friend is mechavin to be mitzi with this bracha. Then it is very interesting. If your friend is mechavin to be mitzi with the bracha of lehaniach, then you do answer amen, because the amen is a sign that you're utilizing his bracha. Now, if you hear Kaddish or Kedusha, do not be mafsik to answer with them. V'im pasak v'ana amen yesh me'raba Kedusha barchu, oisha ana amen alei bracha sheshama, chayzer u'mevarech. You go back and you make a bracha. Now, like I said, the Mishnah Berurah is paskening that if somebody interrupted and he answered Amen Yishmei Rabba or Kedusha or Baruch Hu, or he answered Amen for a bracha, you have to go back and make another bracha on the tefillin. Which means like this. That means if you answered Kaddish, Kedusha, Amen between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, you're going to have to make 2 brachas on the Shel Rosh. Now, why didn't I say that? I don't think the Mechaber holds that way. I don't think the Shulchan Aruch holds that way. Because the Shulchan Aruch says, if you talk out L'tzarech Tefillin, Einoi Chazon V'ach. Im Shama Kaddish, Lo Yafsik. Why does he say Lo Yafsik? He should say Lo Yafsik, and if you did, Chayzer Mavarich. In other words, Oh. Now let's look in the Be'er Halacha for a moment. I also said that means according to us you would have to make 2 brachas on the Shel Rosh. Not so pasuk. Says the Be'er Halacha, I am b'mishabrusa b'sivkatan lamed vav the impasak va'ana chayzer u'mavarich va'ayin b'chay adam shekasav b'pshitus d'l'didan sarach levarich shtayim al Shel Rosh. For us, if we answer Dvar Shebikedusha, you're going to have to make 2 brachas on the Shel Rosh. U'la mechaber lo yivarich kiyam al mitzvahs. According to mechaber, you only make al mitzvahs. Uva'artzis achayim hechriya. The Malbim says no. Debazeh afilu didan denoigin karbeinu tam. Even we who make 2 brachas on the Shel Rosh, lo yivarich kiyam bracha achas. We're only going to make 1 bracha. V'hu al mitzvahs ayin shamilsa b'taima. Look over there for his rationale. Says the Malbim, it's a svek sveika. Maybe the halach is like Rashi, that even if you talk, you don't make a bracha on the Tvon Sharosh, only al mitzvahs. So Rashi's shita is that if you talk out, you don't make a bracha on the Sharosh, lahaniach. We paskin like Rabbeinu Tam. But even if you're going to say like Rabbeinu Tam, that if you talk out, you have to make 2 brachas on the Shel Rosh, maybe we don't go like Rabbeinu Tam regarding Dvar Shebikedusha. Now, this is a chiddush to me, that if you answer Dvar Shebikedusha, you have to make a bracha again. Because why does the Mechaber just say lo yafsik, but why doesn't he say you'll be chayzer mavarich? So I want to point out, Marv Rabbi say, that the Sharat Tzion says that the Taz agrees to the way I said it, that you would not have to go back. But Roiv Achroin, almost all the Achroinim disagree. Almost all the Achroinim say that if you answer Dvar Shebikedusha, you do go back and make a bracha, including, and now there's going to be a machlokes whether you go back and you make most brachas. I would humbly say that if somebody answers Dvar Shebikedusha, that we have another reason not to say 2 brachas on the Shel Rosh. In other words, we know if somebody talks, they have to say 2 brachas on the Shel Rosh. But the Mechaber would never say you should say 2 brachas on the Shel Rosh. So now if somebody answers Dvar Shebikedusha, Bichlal, the Taz would say you don't have to say any bracha you don't have to make lahaniach at all. The Taz holds you never have to make lahaniach if you answer Dvar Shebikedusha. And even according to the Achronim that say you do, but in general the Mechaber holds you don't make lahaniach on the Shel Rosh. So the position of the Malbim of his svek sveika, I think we're adding another suffix. In other words, the Mishabura definitely paskins if you answer Dvar Shebikedusha, you're going to have to make 2 brachas on the Mishabura paskins that if you answer Dvar Shebikedusha, you have to go back and make another bracha on the Shel Rosh. But to say you have to make 2 brachas, like the Chai Adam says, I think that's very difficult to say. Number one, we have the Artzis HaChayim, As the Chaim says, it's a svek sveika. That even if you're going to say that Allah is like Rabbeinu Tam, that when you talk out, you have to make a bracha on the Shel Rosh lahaniach, but maybe not for Kaddish. Or maybe that's what the Malbim is saying. Maybe the Malbim's second suffix is, like we thought originally, that Kaddish and Kedusha is not a hefsek. So in other words, we paskin, the way the Mishnah paskins, Kaddish and Kedusha is a hefsek. But now regarding making two brachas on the Shel Rosh, so when the Mishnah Berurah says Chayzer u'mevarech, that's definitely going to be al mitzvahs, which by the way we make anyway. Whether you make lohaniach, the Chai Adam says yeah, and the Malbim says no. Uv'chol hamoed, the Mishnah Berurah continues, Hamaniach tefillin Rabbeinu Tam v'chayoytze shemaniach b'li bracha yesh lahakel u'lahafsik la'anias amin yeshmei rabba kedusha baruch v'amen. On Chol hamoed, where you're not making a bracha, then you could be mafsik for dvarim Shebikedusha. But afterwards, you should move the shel yad from its place. Therefore, you're memashmesh in the shel rosh on the shel yad before you put on the shel rosh, so that it should be one havaya. So now the Mechaber says that if you hear a dvarim Shebikedusha, don't be mafsik, but you should be silent. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the hashtika ka'aniya, silence is like answering. Le'inyan la'asei sidei chayva, regarding being yoytze your chiyuv, avaloi sheyichashiv kahafsaka, but not that it's considered like a hefsek. Okay, Rabbi, so we'll hold it over here, and the Bez Hashem Monday we'll pick it up in Sif Yod Aleph. Wishing everyone a wonderful day. Kol tov. Kol tov, everyone.
Rabbi, if Shtia is Kaniya, like it just says, then why do you have to say Amen on the bracha?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.